Second vignette. It's now 3 years later. I'm married. I'm living in San Diego. Get a little piece of paper in the mail. Piece of paper says, to Captain Charles C. Krulak, proceed and report to the Republic of Vietnam for duty with the 3rd Marine Division. I go, holy mackerel. You mean to tell me that Bob Hope hadn't got there yet? He'd come and gone. We're still there. And so, much to the chagrin of my wife and my young son, who at that time was just a little over a year old, we got in my Renault Dauphine and drove up from San Diego to Norton Air Force Base, which was the port of embarkation of all Marines going to Vietnam. And I can remember as if it was yesterday. It was getting near dusk, and we drove into the parking lot at Norton Air Force Base, right outside the hangar. And I can remember my wife getting out of the car and my young son getting out of the car, and she's holding him, and I go to say goodbye to her. And I mean, I'm emotional. You'll find this out. I'm a very emotional guy, and I'm sitting here, I'm crying. And my wife is crying. My son, who's being squished between us, he's crying too. He doesn't know why he's crying, other than he's getting crushed. But he's looking at his mom and his dad, and it was a bad scene. I mean, I said, enough of this. Get in the car. I put her in the car, and the last thing I see is her driving away in this beat-up old Renault Dauphine, and it's typical. Just as she's getting ready to go out of my sight, I watch the left rear taillight go out. Now, those who are spouses of people who deploy know what I'm talking about. I mean, it always happens. No sooner does the ship leave that everything starts breaking. Well, that was it. I saw her walking away, and I just said to myself, my gosh, I can't believe it. I walk into the hangar. It's monstrous. It is filled with Marines, probably 98% of them on their way to Vietnam for the first time. About as many people in that hangar as there are in this auditorium. Well, I walk in, and I immediately look to my right, and here is this young private first class. He's standing over here. In his hand is a gym bag, and it says, San Diego, the city in motion. Well, I was from San Diego, so I started walking over because I, wanted to say something. I was feeling pretty bad myself. And as I got close to him, I realized that he was 4 years old. I mean, this was the youngest looking PFC I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I don't know how many of you have little brothers or little sisters, and when they're real baby, when they first come back from hospital and you turn them over to change the diaper, you know what their butts look like? Their little fannies, they're all wrinkled and they have that little cellulite and all that stuff. That's what his face looked like. I mean, if his smile were vertical, it would have been there. But anyhow, the point is, this kid is so young. This kid was so young. So I go over there and I say, how are you doing? I'm Captain Krulak. And he goes, sir, I'm PFC Cameron. I said, PFC Cameron, please stand at ease. Yes, sir. I said, Cameron, stand at ease. Yes, sir. I said, I noticed your bag. It says you're from San Diego. Are you from San Diego? He said, yeah, I am from San Diego. I said, where are you from? He says, 2151 Ditmar Road. I said, my gosh, we live about 3 blocks from there. And we started talking, and about 30 seconds into our conversation, it became obvious this guy was petrified. Petrified. He had never in his life been further north than Orange County, had not been further east than the Cuyamaca Mountains, further south than Tijuana, and you can't go much to the west because it's ocean. I mean, this guy had never gone out of San Diego. He was an only child. He was an only child. He was 17 years old, and he was going to war, and he was scared to death. So I'm trying to make him feel better. I said, what's your military occupational specialty? What are you going to do as a Marine? He said, sir, I'm going to be a radio operator. I said, a radio operator? He said, yes, sir. I said, you got it made. You got it made. You'll be in the rear with the gear. You'll be so far back in the rear, you'll be in some command bunker 20 feet underground. You'll be safe. He says, sir, really? Really? Is that right? I said, would a captain ever lie to you? And of course, he said, no, sir. No, sir. I said, well, you're going to be okay. Don't worry. And he said, fine. And we talked a little bit longer, and then I went. They called out the plane. They said, okay, everybody going to Vietnam on Flying Tiger 197. You're loading up now. Now, here's a little hint to you. Never fly Flying Tiger Airlines. Okay, if you get a ticket, I don't care if it's a freebie, don't accept it. This was a 17-hour flight. 17 hours into Da Nang, Vietnam. I'm sitting in one part of the plane, old PFC Cameron. He's way down the fuselage, but on the aisle. Well, 17 hours, every once in a while you have to make a head call. So I'd get up and I'd start walking to the restroom. And as I'd walk, I'd see Cameron, and he'd be looking at me, and you could see his eyes getting bigger and bigger and bigger. At that time, you know, that was a peace sign. Okay, so I'd give him the old peace sign, hand up to my ear like it was a radio because he's a radio operator, thumbs up, don't worry about it. And you'd see him kind of relax. He'd give me a smile, and I'd go do what I had to do and go back and try to get some sleep. We finally get to Da Nang. It's right out of the movie Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams. Door opens up. It's hot. It's windy. It's dirty. It's yucky, as my son would say. At the bottom of the plane ramp was a Marine major, and he had in his hand this little thing. He said, everybody that's going to the 1st Marine Division, get into this group. And a whole bunch of people were smart enough to go over there where the 1st Marine Division was. Then he say, everybody that's going up with the 3rd Division, which was still up along the demilitarized zone, get over into this group. So I'm walk over to this group. Who's there with me? PFC Cameron. His eyes are like this. Like this. I start giving him my routine. And it's going to be okay, don't worry, radio. And I got about 2/3 of the way through, and he said, sir, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I said, pardon me? And he says, sir, I just don't want to talk to you. I said, oh, I got it, okay. We get up to Dong Ha, which is the headquarters of the 3rd Division, and I shake his hand. I said, Cameron, I'll see you in 13 months, same place, and we're going together. We'll go home together. It was a 13-month tour. He said, okay, sir. We shook hands, and I got in a helicopter, and about 30 minutes later, I was in the middle of the jungle. They dropped me in a landing zone. I mean, to tell you, the middle of Indian country. And who's there to meet me? There's not an officer in that company. Who's there to meet me? The biggest 1st sergeant in the Marine Corps. He looked like Shaquille O'Neal. Honest to God, he looked like Shaquille O'Neal. This guy was 6'8". He weighed about 260 pounds. And I mean, he was a monster. He had no body fat. Not 2%, not 1%, 0%. This guy was all muscle. Hair, no hair. I mean, I can remember every morning. I mean, this guy was a monster. Now, let's be honest. He's 6'8". I'm sitting here, I'm looking at him, I say, Top, good to meet you. He says, Skipper, good to meet you. He grabbed a hold of my hand. If I had had a surgeon, I mean, we would have had the operation right there. He crushed every bone in my hand. I mean, this guy was something else. He was almost 30 years in the Marine Corps. He had fought in Korea. This was his second tour of Vietnam. I mean, this was the ultimate lifer. And for the next 3 days, he took me around that company and he introduced me to every single Marine in that company. He knew every one of their names. He knew where they were from. He knew their hopes, their aspirations. It was phenomenal. At the late afternoon of the third day, I am sitting on an ammo can writing a letter to my wife when an eclipse of the sun took place. That means that the first sergeant was coming towards me. I mean, this guy blotted out everything. So I'm sitting there and I see this shadow come over the page and I look up and there he is probably 20 yards away. And he's walking right towards me, and behind him, as if he were a mother hen with about 5 or 6 little chickies following him, was the first sergeant coming with 5 or 6 what we call BNGs, brand new guys, people joining the company. Who was the first brand new guy? Anybody? Cameron. If looks could kill, I would not be here. There would be somebody else standing here because it certainly wouldn't have been me. I mean, all he wanted to do was to get over the first sergeant and get his hands around my neck. And that would have been it. I mean, I would have been finished. I'll never forget the only thing he said to me was, and this is in the rear with the gear. That sent a heck of a signal. Some of you might know, I am a Christian. And so I thought to myself, you know, the good Lord's trying to tell me something with this kid. And so I said, Cameron, you're going to be my radio operator. You're going to carry the company radio. And honest to God, for the next 9 months, we developed the most phenomenal relationship. The most phenomenal relationship. And all of you are going to have the opportunity sometime in your life to develop that kind of relationship. It's a relationship that often is between husband and wife. It's a relationship between friends. It's a relationship that's brought about by a closeness that is augmented by stress and pressure. And you can either break or you can come together. Well, we came together. And we lived in the same foxhole for 9 months. We ate the same food for 9 months. You know, he would share letters that he got from his mom and dad. I would share letters that I got from my wife, or parts of the letters I got from my wife. And the reality is, we became unbelievably close. And although our age difference was no more than 6 or 7 years, he literally was as much a son to me as I could have had. I mean, he was my son. At the end of the 9th month, the company was given a very simple mission. We were getting missions every 2 or 3 days, so we had done a lot of things, but at the end of the 9th month, we were given a simple mission. And the mission was to move up a finger, get up on top of a ridge line, put ourselves in a defensive position, and wait while the rest of our battalion swept down that ridge line, hopefully catching whatever enemy they could and driving them into my company position. A very, very simple mission. And so we started up this finger. I had 2 platoons up. I had one platoon back in reserve, and my command group was in the center. And we probably moved up about 200 meters up this finger when we started to take sniper fire. For those of you who've never been shot at, if you're getting shot at and the bullets aren't close to you, it sounds like a ricochet. Ping, ping. And this is another great lesson for the Coast Guard Academy. When to know when you're getting shot at. What do you think? This is free. I mean, I'm giving you this free. If you hear it sound like a ricochet, keep moving, men. Keep moving, women. Just keep going. If you hear it go crack, you better get down, because that bullet is very close to you, and the sound you're hearing is the sound barrier being broken by that bullet. All I was hearing was ping, ping, so we kept on pushing. And we went up probably 300 more meters up that finger when all of a sudden a loud crack right over my left shoulder. And I mean to tell you, I hit the deck. I dove for the deck. And as I was diving, I looked behind me, and here was this precious young PFC carrying my radio, had taken it right in the chest. I mean, he had taken it right in the chest, and he went down hard. And I was on the ground, so I crawled over to him, and I opened up his flak jacket. The flak jacket had, at those times, kind of an armor plating in them. And that bullet had hit the armor plating, but unfortunately was going at such a velocity that all that did was expand the head of the bullet. And I mean, it went right through him. And it put a hole in this kid's chest the size of the end of a baseball bat. And he was trying to breathe. And every time he breathed, the air, instead of coming up through his throat, would escape out of this hole in his chest. And I mean, it would just be frothing out. And it is the classic sucking chest wound. That's what he had. And when I saw that, I mean, it just blew my mind. And I reached behind my back and I pulled out my first aid pack and I got a pressure bandage. And I brought this young Marine onto my lap. And I put that bandage on his chest. And I just kept it as tight as I could. And I said, "Come on, Cameron. Hang in there, son. You're going to make it. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You just hang in there." And as I was doing that, you could see him starting to turn gray. He was going into shock. And I just hugged him. I brought him up to my chest and I started shaking him. I said, "Come on, son. You're going to make it. You're going to be okay." And just about that time, I was hit on the side of my head so hard that this precious young Marine flew off of my lap. I must have gone maybe 5 yards, and my helmet bounced even further. And I looked up, and standing over me was this first sergeant, having obviously taken his helmet and just beat me upside the head. And he's looking down at me, and he says, "Skipper, what in the hell do you think you're doing? You've got 150 Marines fighting their way up this finger, and you're down here with one? Your responsibility is with those Marines in the fight. We got corpsmen. We got people who can take care of this Marine. Your responsibility is up there fighting with the other 150. Get your ass up the hill." I mean to tell you, I went over there, I grabbed my helmet, I put that sucker on, and I ran up that hill. I caught up with those Marines, and we fought our way back all the way up to the top, just like we were told to do. And we got ourselves in defensive position. And I walked around, I made sure that they had their fields of fire cleared and they were ready to fight later on that evening. And then I walked back to the company command post. And there was this big first sergeant. And he came up to me and he said, "Skipper, I'm sorry I hit you." I said, "Tom, don't be sorry you hit me. You did the right thing. You did the right thing. Don't be sorry you hit me." He said, "Well, sir, I am sorry. I shouldn't have hit you." And I said, "Tom, you were right. You were right. My job was with the people fighting. You did the right thing. It's forgotten about. Don't worry about it." And he said, "Thank you, sir." And then he paused and he said, "Sir, he didn't make it." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" And he said, "PFC Cameron. He died on the way out." And as he said that, this massive First Sergeant of Marines stood there with tears rolling down his cheeks. Rolling down his cheeks. Steve Flynn knows that about 2 years later, I had my second son. My wife and I were blessed with a second son. And his name is Todd Cameron Krulak, named after this precious, precious son of mine. But the story isn't about Cameron. The story is about the first sergeant. This man had spent almost 30 years in the Corps. He was going to retire. He had served in Korea, 2 tours in Vietnam. Tremendous career. Do you think it's okay for a staff non-commissioned officer in the United States Marine Corps to beat on an officer? Does anybody think that is okay? Do you know what he risked by hitting a commissioned officer? He risked his career. It's called assault and battery. It's called Fort Leavenworth, and not to go to the Army Command and General Staff College either. There's a prison there. That's where he would have gone. Yet, there was something in him that when he saw something that was wrong, he took action no matter what the consequences would be. And it's called moral courage. It's called moral courage. Now, you and I can argue all day long about his attention gainer. Okay? Don't ever argue the moral courage it took to do what he had to do. Moral courage. You are going to need it when you hit the fleet, but as the Admiral will tell you, moral courage becomes more and more important the more senior you get. Moral courage is an integral part of being a great leader. So I'm now going to take moral courage and I'm putting it right beside selflessness. It's right there, and it isn't moving.